HQ presented by AMC Plus. Stream the new season of The Walking Dead right now on AMC Plus. That is Amanda Guerra. I'm Chris Hassel. Amanda, it's a unique week in college football. We have no ranked versus ranked games, but the SEC on CBS gives us an interesting matchup, especially the head coach is Lane Kiffin facing lame duck Ed Orgeron.
Very nice, yeah, and they are good friends. It goes back about 20 years, and this will be Ed Orgeron's first game since LSU announcing they would be parting ways with Coach O at the end of the season.
The SEC Game of the Week touches down in Oxford as the Ole Miss Rebels will host the LSU Tigers. It's been quite the past week for LSU. First, they pull off a big upset against one of their biggest rivals.
Fakes the handoff, now rolls, throws, Jure Jenkins at the 5, right corner of the end zone, touchdown, Fighting Tigers!
Then only hours later came the announcement that their head coach Ed Orgeron would not be back with LSU next season. A stunning turn of events for a program who won it all less than 2 years ago.
I'm always going to appreciate my time here. I have no regrets. The circumstances that we haven't won enough games in the last 2 years, I totally get it.
Orgeron, however, did commit to finishing out the season with LSU and will have to have his team ready to play against the high-flying Rebels.
There's a fake on the handoff over the middle. Wide open Drummond. He catches it. He steps into the end zone. Touchdown, Ole Miss.
It might have turned ugly at the end, but it was a big win for Ole Miss, who kept pace in the SEC West and could be one Alabama loss away from potentially playing in the SEC Championship. And if that's not motivation enough, all they have to do is look back to last year's matchup in what was one of the wildest games in college football in 2020, with LSU pulling it out late. Will this year's game provide the same fireworks in the annual Magnolia Bowl? We're in for a good one Saturday afternoon in Oxford.
And let's welcome in the one and only Brad Nessler, who will be on the call as he is every weekend for the SEC on CBS. We have LSU at Ole Miss. Of course, as we saw there, the news breaking this past week, Ed Orgeron and the Tigers parting ways at the end of this season. And this is going to be the first time we're going to see him and LSU on the field since that news broke. I've been trying to figure out how to word this to you. I mean, the mood around this team, is this going to affect them at all heading into this game?
You know, Amanda, I think the kids aren't stupid. Going into last week's game, they probably knew that if they lost that game, that Coach O would be out. And I thought they played their hearts out. So from that standpoint, I think it's going to affect different players in different ways. I think, Ed being on his way out, in some cases, those players committed to the head coach. Some of those players committed to assistant coaches, one spot or another. Some of them said, well, LSU's the school I want to go to. Those are the ones that probably won't worry about it the most. But I think emotionally it'll have an effect on the players without a doubt, because a lot of people love that guy. And, going into the ballgame, I think it'll be interesting to see who wants to play, who wants to kind of spit the bit a little bit, if you will. They didn't do that last week, so I don't think they're going to do it this week. But Ed knows, as you said, very well his opponent, and he knows both schools, having been the head coach there. So he's accustomed to both locker rooms. It's going to be an interesting Saturday for him.
Accustomed to both locker rooms and very accustomed to the guy who will be standing across the field from his friend, Lane Kiffin. And you know better than anyone, I mean, the long history between these two dating back to circa 2001 at USC. And now, of all people, Lane Kiffin's name swirling around potentially to take that LSU job. Do you think this is something that could potentially happen, that he may be interested in?
I think Lane's name's going to come up on a lot of different people's radar, except USC. He's already gotten fired on the tarmac there. I think that one's over with. But I think a lot of places, are going to want Lane's services, LSU among them. I don't know, just because he's been at Ole Miss such a short period of time, that doesn't seem to bother him. Tennessee, it only took a year for him to leave there. So if they open up the checkbooks, I don't know the relationship between Scott Woodward and Lane, but if, there's going to be some big names on there. Personally, I would go, and on the group you just threw up there, I'd go and ask Bob Stoops. But that's just me. I think Billy Napier at Louisiana is kind of high on people's lists as far as a lower level coach that is looking for a chance. But yeah, there's going to be a great list of people that are going to be talked about, at least in that position, and Lane will be one of them.
All right, let's get to the game here. Kiffin saying this week that quarterback Matt Corral not in good shape after carrying the ball 30 times against Tennessee. I'm not sure where you are in the week with your coach's calls, but what can you tell us about Matt Corral and this game?
What I can tell you about Matt Corral, having been around him, he would have to break 2 bones sometime between now and Saturday in his throwing arm for him not to play. He's leading vote. I think he's the leader for the Heisman right now after his performance last week. I think Bryce Young and he are close. But that 195 yards rushing last week on the 30 carries you were talking about, there's not a lot of people that have been able to do that ever. And he is one tough kid. I've seen him land on his head, on his neck, on his knees, on his shoulders, and he always pops up. And I think just because of the season he's having, he would have to have something major wrong with him other than just being beat up because of 30 carries. I think that's a little gamesmanship on Lane's part in that, he wanted to say that about questionable, or I don't know if he's going to be able to play. I think there's no doubt in my mind Corral will be out there and he'll be slinging it around and he'll be running it.
At least give the other side something to think about a little bit there. Matt Corral, a big reason that Ole Miss has the 3rd best total offense in the nation right now. That is not good news for the struggling LSU defense. When it comes to that defense, I mean, what do you think their issue has been so far this season, and how do they start to turn it around?
Sorry I lost the light there, Amanda, but I got a backup one here.
You look great, glowing.
CBS bought me that light right there, and it just, whatever, it lasted that long. Anyway, I think LSU's defense, the biggest problem has been the injury situation. They've lost so many people, and every week somebody new goes down. When you lose both your starting corners, Derek Stingley, Eli Ricks, Ali Gay goes down last week. They just had problems on that side of the ball. I think they did a really nice job last week against Florida. I thought they played a lot better. They didn't give up as many yards on the ground, and that helped the cause. And they got Glenn Logan back last week, who's one of their super seniors. I think he helps to plug the middle a little bit. Damon Clark and those guys are still not going to give up. PJ Azzolari. There's still some good people on that side of the ball. And after watching them against Florida last week, I was concerned, like as you were, because they just given up so many yards. But last week, they were a lot better. So we'll see if that carries over against Ole Miss.
I got to talk to you about this rushing offense, when it comes to LSU. They're just a resurgence for their rushing game that we saw against Florida there, and a lot of that thanks to the running back Tyrion Davis-Price, set a school record there, 287 rushing yards. I mean, what else do we need to know about this kid?
Well, he's been remarkable the last couple of weeks. He did 2 weeks ago as well. And, up until 2 weeks ago, they were one of the worst rushing teams in the country. I think they're 127th, around 70 yards a game, something like that. What they did is they brought in, last week, they brought in an extra, last 2 weeks actually, they played a lot of 2 tight end offense, and one of those tight ends almost is like a lineman, and I think that's what's really helped in the last 2 weeks is the extra beef up front, and then this kid's just starting to tear it up, and, to go for 287 and break the rushing record, and there's been some pretty good ones at LSU, you got to love his performance, and we'll see how banged up he is. Talking about Matt Corral, I got to think Tyrion Davis-Price was a little bit sore on Monday too. So I think he'll be ready to go. I think that will be kind of the offense for LSU, is see if Ole Miss can stop him, because Ole Miss hasn't been able to stop the run yet this year.
This may be ranked versus unranked, but there are so many storylines in this one. Ole Miss, a fairly big favorite at home, though. How do you see this game unfolding?
Well, I think Matt Corral will be Matt Corral. I think they'll throw it around, Ole Miss, that is. I think they'll go a lot on 4th down. They'll want to impress Eli Manning, who's having his jersey retired. They don't want to lose in a game like that. They are favored. They've only lost 1 game. They're 12th ranked in the country. I mean, they keep playing like this. It's maybe Sugar Bowl, So I think they know where they're at right now. They found out where they were at by losing to Alabama. And since then, even though they've given up a ton of yardage, they've been able to survive. And that's what they've done really the last 2 weeks. Gave up big, massive yardage, 350 on the ground to Arkansas, but they survived a 2-point conversion. Last week they survived the last minute against Tennessee with the bottles and the golf balls and everything else flying around. I think they'll find a way, but I don't think LSU is going to give up on their coach. I think they'll play inspired football, and I think it'll be a ground game on LSU's part and probably a throwing game on Ole Miss's part.
Brad, I'm going to make sure to write CBS, tell them to get you a new proper working light that actually lasts throughout an entire
really,
segment.
You and Noah look so good. And not only is this the messiest office in the world, the light has to go out halfway through. I don't believe it.
It looks good. At least we know you're hard at work there. Brad, we can't wait to watch you this weekend and hear your voice as well on that call. Brad Nessler, thank you so much. And, of course, we got the SEC on CBS, LSU at Ole Miss on 3:30. Brad Nessler, along with Gary Danielson, Jamie Erdahl will be on the call there for that game. And I got to tell you, it's an interesting line. Yesterday it was at 9.5. Today it's fluctuating a little bit, back down to 9. The total for this one is big, 76. And, of course, there's questions around guys like Matt Corral. So how do you approach betting this game? There's a lot of questions when it comes to that. Thankfully, we have answers. For more on that, let's welcome in our betting expert, Emory Hunt. Emory, we had Danny and Brady on yesterday, and Brady said, look, he likes Ole Miss to cover the 9.5. It was then, 9 it is now, if Matt Corral is healthy. But how do you even approach betting this game with a quarterback questionable like that?
Yeah, you have to take a conservative approach because, number one, you can't trust Lane Kiffin because he's the ultimate troll in a good way. So you don't know if he's telling the truth or not. But let's say he is telling the truth, and a questionable, maybe banged up Matt Corral is not going to be the most effective, dynamic offense that we've seen, especially when you look at LSU's finally starting to find its pass rushing chops, or they're finally starting to find its coverage chops. And if you have a quarterback that's not playing at 100%, it could be an issue. It could be a lower scoring game. So I would take every conservative approaching this game because of the questionable Matt Corral coming into this matchup.
What about trends, Emory? Any trends we need to keep an eye on in this game?
LSU winning the last 5, and I think when you look at LSU winning against Ole Miss, it usually is predicated on their ability to run the football, their ability to play better defense than Ole Miss. We know Ole Miss just usually doesn't have defense, and now they start to have a little bit more defense, but everything is usually favoring LSU in those victories. They tend to be the better team. That's why this one's a little bit interesting. It's probably the biggest betting trend that I'm keeping an eye on.
What about the emotion of Coach O? I mean, a lot of people, we've had so many experts on now talking about it and saying, look, it's going to affect this LSU team in some way. Do you keep that in mind?
You do, but with coaches, and this is something that people never talk about, it all depends on which players you ask. You know, we know coaches have different relationships with many different players. So if you're a guy that likes Coach O, you're going to play your best. If you're a guy that doesn't have a really good relationship with Coach O, you're ready for him to get out the door. So I feel like it's always, okay, who do you ask? Who do you depend on? Who's giving you valuable information or credible information? Because everyone has their own feeling or emotion toward what's going to happen. I think the biggest thing is that LSU wants to go out on top and wants to win. And I think that's going to be the biggest emotion we're going to see come from the Tigers in this game.
All right, let's get a play for you on this game. So LSU at number 12, Ole Miss. Ole Miss now favored by 9. The total here, it's a big one, Emory. I don't know how confident you feel in this 76 there. What would be your best play?
Listen, the best play would be go under that total because I like what I saw from LSU, and I expect LSU to take the air out of the football and try to shrink this ball game with their rushing attack and their defense. I feel as though we'll be able to get pressure on Matt Corral, and if he's banged up, that's not a good sign. So I will take the under, and if I'm taking a side, I'm taking LSU in the points because of what I just said. You take the air out of football when you have an explosive offense. You don't want them to get possessions, so you control the ball with your run game. If that's how they're going to play this one offensively for LSU, that's an easy win for them, in my opinion. And defensively, they still can match up on a perimeter with those wide receivers of Ole Miss. They can also match up in the trenches defensively with their pass rush against that offensive line of the Rebels. So I would say take LSU in the points. It'll be a lower scoring game, a tight game, definitely entertaining though, but definitely go under and take LSU in the points here.
Emory, I need to make a confession. I was not listening to you a while ago, let's say a month ago, and I bet on emotions, and that never works. So this is what I need you for this weekend, because I haven't put any money on any games in college football since then because I am not very good at it. So I need a parlay. Just make some of that money back. What have you got for us?
Well, let's focus on 2 conferences, and I think you can follow this, right? Big 12 and ACC. I'll look at the ACC first. Wake Forest, I feel as though will take care of business against Army. Everyone is high on Pitt as if Pitt is throwing out there Hugh Green and Ricky Jackson and all those former greats. Pitt is good, but I don't think they're good enough to beat Clemson just yet, even if a Clemson team is playing down. And in the Big 12, even though I love Sir Roderick Thompson, the running back for Texas Tech and what he can do. I can't trust Texas Tech's defense as far as I can throw them. I can trust Kansas State's defense and their special teams. Take Kansas State. And I don't understand why this line is high on Oklahoma State. I know people are shaky on Oklahoma State, but 7 points being an underdog to Iowa State, take the Cowboys and the points in this one. This will be another Big 12 shootout, but definitely under that 7 number. So those are your 4 best bets on the money line that you can go have a nice weekend with. Listen to the Czar today, man, and do your due diligence and go get those bets in.
I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna rewind this like people should at home. I'm gonna screenshot it, but I agree with you about Oklahoma State, especially coming off that win against Texas. Emory Hunt, thank you so much for joining us here to give us a betting preview of the SEC on CBS. And there it is. It's gonna be an interesting one. Of course, we're still waiting to find out about Matt Corral, but as you heard there from both Emory and Brad Nessler, they do expect Matt Corral to play. And then when it comes to LSU's first game with Coach O since LSU announcing they would be parting ways at the end of the season. We'll see how that plays into this one. By the way, if you would like more college football, make sure to download and follow the Cover 3 podcast, recapping Week 7, getting ready for Week 8. They're discussing the LSU situation. And then something that I love that they do, they compare the AP poll with the coaches poll with certain teams. Make sure to download and follow.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.